Hello and welcome back to ZoneMinder TV. At some commenters' request, I'm making a video here today dealing with turning on logon authentication and some of the pitfalls and problems that you may have along the way. Normally it just works, but a variety of issues, including time zone and the date, can really cause a lot of problems. So this is coming off of our fresh install. I've updated to 1.36.33. If you've watched the previous videos, this should be pretty familiar. So, as I mentioned, I've set this up as a contrived example. Normally, when you install Ubuntu, it asks you where you are in the world and sets the time zone, etc., accordingly. But depending on other things that can go on and whether your clock is set to store Greenwich Mean Time or whatever, you can have problems. So I've set this to have the date or the time zone be UTC, which is Greenwich Mean Time. And I'm going to go through the steps of turning on authentication, and it's going to break because I made it do that intentionally. So to turn on authentication, you're going to come to Options, and everything is in the System tab. And we'll scroll down. We see this option here, Opt Use Auth. This is the big master switch for whether we are using authentication or not. Obviously, if it's checked, it's going to be on. Authentication type built-in. Unless you really know what you're doing, you probably don't want remote, because that's if you're going to authenticate to an LDAP database or some other system. So don't mess with that one. The case insensitive usernames, again, you're not interested in. That's for remote systems where the username is case insensitive. Auth relay, again, you probably don't want to mess with this. So when we load an image or something, or load up a stream, we have to know how to authenticate to that stream. And we don't really want to put a username and password in the URL, plain text or whatever. It's not secure. So what we like to do is we'll make a hash of the password that is hashed with time and username and some other bits of information. So it's a little more secure if you're not using HTTPS. If you're not using HTTPS, there's no security whatsoever, and so you might as well just not even bother. So make sure everything is using HTTPS. This auth hash secret, again, I mentioned bits of information used in that hashing function. So you want to type something unique into here, something that no one would guess. Auth hash IPs. So again, we can use the IP address that we're coming from. This can be, the problem is that a lot of us don't have a fixed IP address, or perhaps we're going through Cloudflare or something where the IP address might change. And really the amount of security added by turning this on is pretty minimal. So I do recommend leaving it off. You turn it on, and if everything works great, then fine, you're good. But I find it causes more trouble than it's worth. Auth hash TTL, again, don't change it. This is 2 hours. What we do is we generate a new hash at half of this time. So every hour we'll get a new one, so we never even get close to this. Then this is probably not something you want to tweak. Auth hash logins, it just says whether or not we use this hashed relay. You're probably best to not turn this off. And that's really it for that. So I have turned that on, and I'm going to click save. As you can see, it's now asking me to log in. Now the default account, admin account, its password is admin. So we can log in, and you can see that worked great. Now we get to the breakage part. Now I'm in Canada and near Toronto, and so of course my time zone I had set to America, Toronto. But as I mentioned, I set the system time zone to be Greenwich Mean Time, and this is going to break our image loading, because when we go to authenticate that image stream, we're using a hash that is using a different time by different hours, by about 5 hours difference than what the system thinks. So that breaks. So how to fix it? Well, on Ubuntu and systemd systems. Here, first let's just you can see, you can check your time zone just by typing that. And we want to set this to the correct time zone. Now, one other thing that's important is you now need to restart MySQL, because now you can actually set the time zone specifically in MySQL, but by default it just uses whatever the system is using. And because I just changed it, it doesn't know about that yet. So we're going to restart MySQL so that it's now in America, Toronto. And then if I've done everything correct, we're just waiting for, there we go. Our images work again. Yeah, that time zone difference is one of the major hangups that people get. Another thing that, the initial login might work, but then it'll automatically log you out after a minute, because again, your hours out of whack in terms of system time versus what ZoneMinder thinks is happening. And we're talking about PHP land, right? So the things you want to check there is your system time zone and the time zone here set right here in this setting. They've got to match. If you get locked out, let's say, I don't know, you change the password or whatever, you can't get into ZoneMinder, it won't let you log in. Here's how you can basically turn off authentication so you can get back in. So we're going to do it at the SQL console. So I'm just doing that to figure out which entry it is, because the ID can change between versions. But if you didn't do that step, you don't need to do that step. We can just say update config set value equals 0, where name equals set opt use auth. There, that has disabled authentication. So if we reload this, we see opt use auth, and it will allow me back in. You can go in and you can reset your passwords and get back in business. So that's a short, quick video about how to enable login authentication on ZoneMinder. And again, first thing to do would be to set up your SSL certificates so that no one can read the passwords as they're transmitted to and from the web server. But if you're dealing just with your local machine, you're probably pretty safe. Thanks for listening. Hope you enjoyed this video. For early access to more content, please consider being a patron. You can find other ways to donate to ZoneMinder on our donate page. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.